Alright, so I know what you're going to say right off the bat. I thought you already made a video about Dragon Ball Super, why the hell are you making another one? And the answer to that is, well, it sucked a lot. Most of my arguments were bad, most of my editing was bad, the thumbnail completely fucking sucks, and there's so much useless, sped up footage of random shit that I honestly hated the video about 3 days after I posted it, so fuck it, I'm making another one. This time, however, I actually know what I'm talking about and can properly explain my points instead of just stating the point and moving on. I would find a bunch of clips of me doing this, but then again, I might as well just put 2/3 of that video into this video, and no one wants to see that. But if you do want to watch that whole video, there's a link to it in the description in case you don't know how channels work, and have fun, I guess? But today, I'm not going to talk about that video, because that is what this video is for, ya dingus. Also, disclaimer, I have only watched the original Japanese sub of the show. I have not read the manga, which is entirely different from the show, in that I've heard that the current arc is actually doing some really interesting things, and I've only seen snippets of the Funimation dub, but not nearly enough to speak about it for any length of time greater than the remains of this sentence. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get talking about Dragon Ball Super, but this time, it's good. So in the last video, I mostly talked about the final arc, the Tournament of Power, and I did that for a very important reason. Fuck off! No, really, I did this because I had the most to say about that arc, and because it more or less served as an example of most of the problems the show as a whole contained, animation issues notwithstanding, mostly. Now, one of the big things I noticed right off the bat is that the time limit is really just a useless piece of shit that does nothing it's introduced to do. What I mean by that is that the tournament part of the arc is 34 episodes long, and the actual Tournament of Power, canonically, is 48 minutes long. So aside from the fact that why would anyone use 48 minutes, because that's oddly specific, each 22-minute episode of Super covers, on average, 1.41 minutes of the entire tournament. So the entire arc moves at a glacial pace. Unfortunately, it's still a bit worse than this, because that 1.41 minutes per episode number is just that, an average. In fact, I mapped out exactly how many minutes of the tournament each episode covers, as well as how many minutes are left by the end of each episode, that is, when either one is even fucking provided, and it's simply pathetic. I'll put a link to the full document in the description. Now, I know this is anime, which means the action has to be just fast enough to look cool, but still slow enough for viewer consumption and recognition, and there have to be seemingly millions of cutaways to what other characters are saying and doing, but this level of slow-ass pacing almost makes me want to actually throw up all over the goddamn floor just by talking about how slow the pacing is. Oh god. Oh, remember when I mentioned that I only included the data when I was given any? That's because, as you'll see in the full document, which you should definitely read because I wasted an hour of my goddamn life on it, there are a few episodes in the beginning half of the tournament, and even a couple later towards the end, that do not give the remaining time. At all. Meaning, I could not gather how many minutes of the tournament were covered in multiple episodes. So even through Toei's bullshit arbitrary rules for how time works in this dimension, which, let me remind you, has no concept of time or space, they completely dropped the fucking ball. Why set up a complicated time scale when half the time you're not even going to use it anyway? The only answer I could come up with is that whoever was supervising the writing staff for those episodes, which, by the way, they changed from episode to episode, realized, oh shit, Literally nothing of value came from this episode, except maybe a universe got eliminated? Better not let viewers suspect us of any sort of failure, and in doing so, they only added fuel to the fire that is my rage. Most of that stuff could be more or less forgiven if the content of the entire tournament was consistently good. Yes, there are a good number of cool scenes and moments and episodes, but the key word here is consistently. There has to be enough consistently good content to warrant an arc being as long as this, and for a tournament, that generally tends to be using the characters and their development through all the challenges presented to them to tell an interesting and compelling story. Even if we already knew that Universe 7 was going to win anyway, the tension should come from how the hell are the characters going to face the insurmountable odds and overcome them to achieve victory, or in this case, survival. And what's the story that Super spends so much of its runtime telling us? Jiren is very strong, and Goku has to beat him. Yeah, I have several questions. Mainly, why is this the one story beat that takes up so much of the tournament? I know that plenty of other events take place throughout the tournament. In fact, if you look at all the individual fights on the Dragon Ball Wiki, you can see that just, holy hell, there are so many actual fights. But most of these names belong to people who get barely any screen time or just get insta-fucked by more narratively important characters. Like, do you remember Nick? The guy who almost killed himself along with Goku in the very beginning? What about ToP? Probably not by name, and I know that you are about to say, well, don't you mean Topo? And, well, ask Funimation. Now, what about Magica, the man with the weird body? I only remember him because it's a play on a Japanese word that roughly translates to seriously, and I think that's just pretty great. Oh, I gotta pace yourself, VK. There's so much of the video left to go. The issue I'm getting at is that anytime the show isn't focusing on Universe 7 beating Jiren, it's focusing on useless bullshit. This part isn't the fault of individual episode writers, I feel, but of the writing staff as a whole. There are so many characters that don't get enough screen time simply because there are so many other shit characters involved in shit fights with the good characters or with themselves for some reason. Which sucks hard because the show has spent at least 2 minutes building up characters like all of Universe 6 who we already met in a previous arc, plus the female Saiyan and Femme Broly, and possibly even a full minute building up the only 3 members of the Pride Troopers from Universe 11 that anyone can actually name. And because there are so many worthless, trash characters, every time a fighter gets knocked off, it feels like another drop of water in a bucket that suddenly grows limbs and tries to punch you in the face whenever Universe gets erased. I say try because it is, after all, a fucking bucket. Even when the universes get erased, there's barely any weight to them because we all saw how Toei ruined the whole point of the struggle in the Goku Black arc with the Deus Ex Machina of, he's becoming evil itself. Only Zeno can fix it by blowing the everlasting hell out of everything in this universe. Bullshit. So there was this feeling implanted in viewers' minds that everything that happens in this entire arc isn't going to mean a goddamn thing after the final episode. Gotta make sure my vocal cords are strong. And funnily enough, that's exactly what happens. All the universes get wished back to existence because the Zenos would have destroyed everything otherwise because that's good character and plot writing, I guess. And Goku loses the only thing of value he gained over the course of this arc, the Ultra Instinct form. Oh yeah, that's another thing I wanted to touch on. All the useless bullshit given to main characters to increase the dramatic flair of the few moments they're ever shown. And when I say this, I'm specifically talking about the transformations. Look, it's Dragon Ball, I get it. New and more powerful transformations are the new hot thing. I mean, they have been in shonen anime for a while, but Dragon Ball Super just takes it too far. In fact, throughout the entire 131 episode run, the only arc that did not show off a brand new, never-before-seen transformation for any character was the Universe 6-7 tournament, and the only one that only showed off a good transformation with no bad ones was the Battle of Gods arc, which doesn't even count because that one was a retelling of the second best Dragon Ball movie of all time. Or maybe it does, I don't know. So the series is at least 3 for 5 on stupid bullshit transformations, and in the Tournament of Power, it goes even further beyond stupid bullshit. In fact, I'm pretty sure one of the rookie writers at Toei said to a higher-up, "Why don't we just do Super Saiyan Blue, but worse?" And nobody bothered to question him because they were so short on time that they figured it wouldn't matter anyway. And they were right, it didn't matter anyway. The only good transformation in the Tournament of Power is, without a doubt, Ultra Instinct. And for 2 reasons. Number 1 is that it finally put an end to Jiren. Wait, it didn't even do that. Okay, scratch that. For one good reason, and that's because it's been slowly built up and alluded to throughout the course of this series. Whis had been trying to get Goku and Vegeta to simply move their bodies independent from their conscious reactions. In other words, being fully aware of the entirety of all space around them with perfect accuracy like what he does minus that one scene in the movie. And when Goku comes back from his Spirit Bomb singularity at the beginning of episode 110, it finally feels like this legacy has been fulfilled. And it even lets Goku stand toe-to-toe with Jiren because reasons. However, it is not without its faults. It's been built up to over the course of the series. Great. Now how was it executed? Here, let's go through everything that happens, starting when Goku's Spirit Bomb got him caught in a singularity, which is, by the way, the only explanation I could come up with for why he suddenly disappears and then reappears somehow, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So the Spirit Bomb detonates in Goku's face, and everyone is stunned. Special focus is paid to Beerus as he stands in utter shock while everyone around him speaks. While being an effective way to save time and have to draw less frames, it also sells the sheer desperation that Beerus is feeling. The one person he was counting on to win him the whole tournament and keep him from being erased has seemingly killed himself in his own attack. We then cut to the Grand Priest, who claims that because it was his own attack that killed him, there will be no punishment rendered towards Jiren, which only adds to the desperation. Zeno moves to remove Goku from the Universe 7 standings, but just then, the entire null void begins to shake. Flashy stuff happens, and Goku is back, but something's very different about him. The strange aura, the silver glint in his eye, and the extreme focus and precision in his movements. We'll just pretend there was a fly there or something. It almost seems instantaneous, like his body moves independently from his brain. Then he and Jiren really throw down in an absolutely stunning animation sequence, complete with one of the most hype tracks in the show, which, by the way, the dub fucked up horribly, until that final punch. And it's worthless. Jiren catches it, blasts the now exhausted Goku away, and he's down for the count until Frieza gives some of his energy to Goku. At this point, he can at least stand up and lay low to recover his energy for a bit. And by a bit, I mean about 2 to 3 minutes because of how time works in this arc, until the female Saiyans from Universe 6 come by and say, "Hey, wanna fight? I know you nearly died and all, but I wanna see how strong you are at your full power despite you not being at your full power." And Goku, being the genius he is, says, "Yeah, okay." That scuffle eventually forces him to go Super Saiyan 3, a form that destroys his body, so that's no good in a tournament. The Universe 6 Saiyans fuse, and Goku randomly pulls Ultra Instinct out of his ass and uses that power to destroy the now fused Kefla before being completely exhausted and out of energy. Let me remind you, all of this happens in the span of 8 minutes after Frieza gave Goku some of his energy. And then about 15 minutes later, he pulls it out of his ass again to fight Jiren again after having gone Super Saiyan Blue with Kaioken times whatever. He didn't make it clear, so I'm guessing it's times 20, which, boy howdy, that should be killing him. And Vegeta having gone what I can only describe as Super Saiyan Blue 2 for a good 3.5 minutes until God Destruction fucking ToP steps in and removes Vegeta from that fight, and Goku kept going for another 30 seconds after that, only to then team back up with Vegeta and Android 17 to fight Jiren again in Blue and Blue 2 respectively to the Saints for another 30 seconds before getting knocked the fuck down, leaving 17 to step in and seemingly sacrifice himself to buy Goku and Vegeta another 30 seconds of time. Then Vegeta steps up, unable to transform because whoops, he did a kamikaze to defeat God of Destruction motherfucking ToP 1 minute ago and still kept going Blue 2 for another bit of time against Jiren, and he throws himself at Jiren for another 30 seconds before giving the last of his energy, how the fuck does he even still have any anymore, to Goku, who steps up to get the shit beat out of him before finally pulling out Ultra Instinct again and fighting Jiren for another minute while somehow gaining energy despite being in a form that causes immense physical strain, almost like, you know, Kaioken times 20, and then reveals that he's now so strong that Jiren can't even touch him. And this is revealed in one of the most dramatic and cathartic scenes in the whole arc, slowly letting us watch Jiren get trounced with multiple hits in the blink of an eye multiple times, and then the glow around Goku fades into the mastered Ultra Instinct form. So now it's the real Ultra Instinct, and everything I just talked about for almost 2 full pages of my script is rendered completely useless. And we only see the real Ultra Instinct for about a minute in-universe before it causes Goku to explode from all the strain it put on his body, and yet he still somehow has more energy to fight after about 30 seconds of rest. Now let me reiterate, I do think that the concept of the Ultra Instinct form is absolutely amazing, but when it is executed like this, you're sort of losing my attention. If the previous 3 times Goku went Ultra Instinct weren't actually Ultra Instinct, then what the fuck were they? Well, the Dragon Ball Wiki calls this Ultra Instinct sign. But since that's stupid, I'm going to call it kind of instinct. It's not Ultra Instinct, but it's, kind of instinct. Regardless, the reason I spent so much time elaborating on every important detail of the latter half of the tournament surrounding Goku and Jiren is because that is all the time Goku has to go kind of instinct 3 different times and then master it. A lowly 24 minutes. And during this, he somehow has as much stamina as he needs, up until the point in the final episode where he can't even go Super Saiyan, at least until he can for the final strike. The implementation of this form could have been at least decent, but it was completely ruined by the fucking time limit. I can't be too mad about it though, because at least that form even got explained at all. Unlike the aforementioned Super Saiyan Blue 2. That isn't even its official name. It just doesn't have one in the anime, and I don't know if it does in the manga either. Nothing about this form gets explained by the show. It's just shown off by Vegeta, and the audience is expected to get hyped because, whoa, his hair is a different color, and he has pupils now, and there's a cool aura around him. Now, there's one thing I'd like to point out. In the scene where Vegeta attains this form, it's when both he and Goku decide to join together and perform a last-ditch effort using both of their maximum power to try to finally knock Jiren out of the tournament. In this scene, Goku activates his Kaioken, and since Beerus mentioned that he's giving it everything he's got, we'll assume it's times 20 again, like I mentioned previously. But Vegeta needs something to unleash to prove that he too is breaking his limits and surpassing even his own power to attack Jiren. But he doesn't have the Kaioken. And he can't just stay at his blue form, because that would not convey Vegeta's drive to win as much as Goku's Kaioken times 20 does. So that's likely why he was given the Blue 2 transformation, because of the one scene when it would have added to the dramatic effect. His reasoning for this? He made a promise to someone who is now dead. Now, maybe it's because that person was Kaba, one of the few people Vegeta has ever opened his heart to, and I completely understand why this is a huge thing for Vegeta. I really do. Vegeta's my favorite character in Dragon Ball. But when it comes to a transformation like this, I really don't think it does a good enough job. I'm just gonna turn this monitor off so that I don't have to worry about it going to sleep again. After ranting on and on for a bit, let's talk about something that's more or less arguable. The music. Now before you say anything, I actually really like the music. I think that nearly, if not all of the tracks accurately convey the emotions of the scenes they're in, and do it very well. My issue, however, comes from the fact that they are overused to the point that I can no longer stand hearing them. So many of the tracks are extremely high energy, high stress, high impact, climactic battle types of tracks, and those are obviously really important to have in something like Dragon Ball. But the key to making those tracks have the oomph that they need is to reserve those tracks for the most high energy, high stress, high tension, climactic battles of the arc. If you hear the track A Tough Battle over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, episode after episode after episode after episode after episode, like the series has been prone to do, for example, then it loses the impact it would normally have. And instead of building dramatic tension, the only type of tension that it would build is the kind where you start groaning and slouching back in your chair because you've heard this nonsense for 131 episodes now and you just want it to fucking stop. And even in the confines of the Tournament of Power, you hear Ultimate Battle so many times that it starts to go from the hypest track in the series to just another battle theme, when it really deserves to be the hypest track in the series. And it's just kind of a damn shame if you ask me. Enough being sympathetic, let's get fucking real. Okay, I've gone on for long enough without talking about my biggest problem with the show, and that's absolutely everything about Jiren. Jiren is the absolute worst part of the Tournament of Power. Worse than the bullshit transformations, worse than the overused music, and worse than the fucking time limit. And this is because the way Jiren is used is completely antithetical to proper character building. What is his main character trait? The fact that he is strong. What is his primary motivation in life? Being strong is good. What does he value above all else? Strength. Are you seeing a pattern here? Strength being absolute is the one thing he stands for that isn't being fucking erased by two incompetent, childlike gods. And yes, it does get worse. Just because a character is boring doesn't mean they can't be used in interesting ways. Sometimes having a one-dimensional villain can be really cool. But this leads to another big problem. Jiren is not a villain, and he's barely an antagonist, but the way the arc is structured makes him out to be one anyways. Right from the start of the tournament, we were told that Jiren is the strongest fighter of them all. Therefore, any fights with any character that aren't Jiren are either completely worthless or meant to show off how truly powerful and unbeatable Jiren is going to be. Either that or to build character in the more narratively important characters, because that's always nice. And the worst part of this is that no one even has to beat Jiren in order to win. The rules of the tournament state that by the time the 48 minutes are up, the universe with the most fighters left standing is victorious. And instead of doing anything with that, the show decides to make beating Jiren the sole priority of the characters. Why? He's practically irrelevant. Alright, look, imagine a scenario. The first 3/4 of the tournament can be completely untouched. They can stay the way they are. But once it gets down to Jiren versus the final 4 from Universe 7, all they would have to do is play defense and focus on not getting knocked out, since there's only one Jiren who has to knock out 4 incredibly strong fighters, and they've already learned that fighting Jiren is akin to suicide. And they've shown off abilities that make it clear they can stop Jiren from knocking them out. Frieza has a paralysis attack that can stop a fighter's movements, so he can throw that out in moments when Jiren is about to deal a heavy blow to a fighter. Android 17 has unlimited energy blasts, and he's previously employed a tactic of constantly firing them to slow or stop a fighter's movements and drain their stamina when he fought against a non-God Destruction piece of shit motherfucking dollar store brand plastic ass ToP. They can very clearly keep Jiren from harming the Universe 7 fighters too badly, and yet they only bring them out in the specific situations that ultimately don't mean anything. And funnily enough, they're both against Toppo, the Pride Trooper who was friends with the one who really needed to be stopped from trying to kill all of Universe 7. This switch from offense to defense would change up the fight dynamic drastically, forcing Jiren to push the offensive and take the fight to the others, bringing out literally any of his character, assuming he had any in the first place, so that we can see what he does when pushed to the brink of universal annihilation. 17 can maybe still sacrifice himself to put up the barriers around Goku and Vegeta. Goku can still master Ultra Instinct and then just refuse to fight Jiren, instead using that worldly focus to simply dodge everything Jiren throws at him. And Frieza and Goku can still team up to keep Jiren from knocking anybody else out if they really wanted to. I don't care. My point is, this simple switch from offense to defense would drastically change up the way the final 8 minutes of the tournament play out, and in my opinion, crank up the dramatic tension and raise the stakes and make those last episodes something I would want to see for more than just, oh my god, just beat Jiren already, like what I was feeling for the actual last episodes. There is, however, one problem with this defensive switch: the ending moments of the tournament. Having the focus on knocking out Jiren did make for a high-stress final battle in episode 131, when every character is pushed to the absolute limit, and having the characters play keep away would definitely remove some of that tension. I am fully aware of that. So, we add this caveat. As time ticks down, and Jiren gets more desperate and angry, maybe he decides to pull out his full power a bit early, therefore having no problem taking out Vegeta and knocking Frieza to the ground, barely able to fight. 17 could then do the barrier and almost sacrifice thing to protect Goku and Frieza from an enormous attack that would otherwise knock them out, leaving Goku to finally say, screw it, and pull out the mastered Ultra Instinct and then switch to offense again, if only to keep Jiren from knocking out anyone else to make the tournament a tie. From there, the final 2 episodes can play out more or less the same as they do in the show, minus Jiren attaining his full power, since maybe after Goku trounces Jiren a bit and he's almost drained of his energy, they realize if they can just knock him out as soon as possible, they can end the tournament slightly earlier and save them all a bit of pain. I could have maybe tweaked many other parts of the tournament, but for the most part, those are minor things that come together to make one big flop of a show. And since I'm not a professional writer who knows every part of the Dragon Ball brand front to back, I'm not going to try. Besides, I've already given a pretty good alternative last episodes, or at least the broad narrative in those episodes. Now, I've sat in front of this camera for a long time now, and I've talked a lot about the Tournament of Power arc, so I would like to end this video with these final statements. I love everything Dragon Ball. I adore all of the works of Akira Toriyama, and I love watching beloved franchises get the love and attention that they rightfully deserve. But as it currently stands, Dragon Ball Super is not what Dragon Ball fans wanted, and it isn't what they deserve. As I said at the end of my previous video, Dragon Ball Super deserves to be perfect. It deserves to be breathtaking. Right now, it isn't. If you love this show to death despite all of its flaws, however, I can't say I blame you. How could I? It's Dragon Ball. But it deserves to have its flaws, both big and small, pointed out, so that in the future, if Super ever does decide to come back, which I desperately hope it does, Toei Animation knows what to do with it and how to make the show as amazing and incredible as it deserves to be. And I would like to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for hearing me out. If you liked what you saw and heard here, consider dropping a like. If you really like what you see and what you hear from me, consider subscribing. I promise I will be uploading something much more consistently from here on out. And with that being said, I'm Van Campone, and I will see you guys next time.